This may have been the most controversial waterway in all of Canada in the early 20th century. This is the Holland River in Holland Landing, Ontario. Our story begins with a political scheme, a way to bring jobs and boost trade in the area. But in the end, it would be politics that would sink this very project. Welcome to Newmarket's Ghost Canal. These concrete walls would have been the first lock on the Holland River Division. The idea came from a federal politician, Sir William Mulock. He represented the riding of North York. Mulock thought that barges could use the Holland River as a canal, and they could service the industries that he would help bring to Newmarket. A quick aside, an important First Nation route has run along this river since time immemorial. It's part of the Toronto carrying place. I think it's worth noting that at this time, canals were already becoming obsolete, and this was mainly because of the growth of railways. According to author James T. Angus, Mulock hated railways. He believed that a public canal system would create competition for rail freight, and this would help keep shipping costs low. In September of 1904, Mulock went all in on his canal plan. The timing seemed right to turn the Holland River into a modern canal. The Grand Trunk Railway had just raised its shipping prices. At the same time, the Canadian government was working to finish the Trent-Severn Waterway. The Holland River would become a division of that route.
My name is Richard McLeod, and most people know me around here as the history hound. The cost of shipping via rail was excessive. We had a number of mills and a number of industries which were dependent upon their ability to bring in supplies. We were sitting next to a natural waterway which extended all the way up to Lake Simcoe. It was only logical that we would do something about that, take advantage of that.
On a political level, the mayor of Newmarket supported Mulock and the Liberal Party, and there was a federal election coming up in just 2 months. Mulock and the Liberals would end up winning that election partly on the strength of the canal idea. Mulock hired an engineer to see if the canal idea would work. The report came back with a definite maybe. There was just one thing that wasn't yet certain. Would the canal have enough water to keep running during the summer? Water shortages weren't unheard of with other canal projects in the area. The Trent-Severn Waterway faced water shortages, and there's still a network of reservoirs meant to keep the levels consistent to this day. However, this canal's opponents made it their rallying cry. The Liberals were trying to build a canal that didn't have any water. In following years, the voters around Newmarket started liking the Conservatives more and more. Mulock knew that building the canal could help the Liberals hold on to their North York seat. Mulock had recently stepped down as MP, but he stayed fairly active behind the scenes. Soon, Mulock and his replacement, Alan Aylesworth, got the canal started, but politics would come back against the project. Remember how Mulock hated railways? Well, it seems he was fairly open about that dislike. He would sometimes go as far as interfering with the Department of Railways and Canals. Well, eventually, the leadership of that department changed, and 2 railwaymen started overseeing the canal project. Yes, those 2 railwaymen remembered how Mulock would scheme against the railways, and so they decided to get even by changing the engineers' plans for the Newmarket Canal. They thought they could make it so ridiculous that it would never be approved. Soon, it was massively over-engineered, and the cost estimates had almost tripled. But the Liberals approved the absurd new plans anyway. Aylesworth, Mulock's replacement, also saw the canal as key to his re-election. By 1908, with another election coming, construction was well underway. Aylesworth put out a contract to build these locks on the second part of the river. Just like with the first locks, the contract went to a Liberal supporter. Come 1909, the third lock was all dug out, but as construction moved faster, more questions came up about the project. The canal became the butt of many jokes, mostly about its water supply, and conservative-leaning newspapers tore into the idea. The water supply question has been one of the easiest targets against the Newmarket Canal. Even today, many historical accounts focus on this reported lack of water. Some have called it Mulock's madness, a foolish ploy by an otherwise successful and well-liked politician. But just how bad was this so-called lack of water? Author Ethel Truhella wrote that engineers had studied the Holland River previously, and decades earlier, they had endorsed the idea of a canal. Now, McLeod is challenging those popular tellings of this story.
Sir William Mulock was a god in Canada, and the Conservatives decided that what they needed to do is they needed to attack the project and sort of undermine all this popularity that he had gained. One of the myths was that there was not enough water. The Conservative government went to the public and said, well, there are no rivers that are feeding it. The engineers responded by saying, but it's on a approximately 20-mile long string of artesian wells, and that is not a problem. Once they decommissioned it, the canal repeatedly filled itself back up through the artesian wells, back up to its 12 feet. Hence, you know, we're standing in an area that used to be 12 feet deep and used to be filled with water, and the town found it necessary to fill it in. And in fact, you know, where I'm standing, there's still water underneath it. There's a concrete base that is sitting on top of the water.
So there may have been enough water, but did the project still make sense? The canal heyday was over, and even the Trent-Severn waterway would never carry the traffic it was meant to handle. By 1909, project costs were ballooning, but at the end of the year, the crews had finished a lot of work. Where I'm standing was once the middle of a large turning basin, a place for the barges to turn around and then head back to Lake Simcoe. All of the concrete walls for this basin were completed. By the next September, the locks 2 and 3 were practically finished, and lock 1 wasn't far behind. But politics still remained a factor. Opposition for the canal continued to grow. Mulock and his supporters had started hiding the cost of the Newmarket Canal within the Trent-Severn waterway expenses. When the opposition politicians found out, they were livid. They asked the Railways and Canals Minister how much traffic the canal would carry. He couldn't give an estimate. Aylesworth said the engineer's report showed the canal would work, but just the same, he protected himself, saying the reports were from before his time. In the middle of this political battle, there was a casualty, the original engineer. Politicians had ruined his reputation through this project, despite the fact that they were the ones who had changed his plans and led to some of the cost overruns. He took the fall for a lot of the issues with the canal, and later on would lose an engineering job in the government to someone far less qualified. The engineer had had enough. He wrote a tell-all letter explaining how politicians had pushed him for cost estimates before he had enough data, how railway and canal department workers had changed his original plans, how he would never let politics get in the way of his professional integrity, and so on. But what effect did that letter have? Well, not much. Shortly thereafter, there was an election. The Laurier Liberals lost to the Borden Conservatives, and one of the first orders of business was to scrap the Newmarket Canal. At that time, it was about 85% complete, but it had too much political baggage to ever open for business.
All the evidence points to the fact that the Conservatives, even if this had been a wonderful project that they fully believed in, they would have canceled it. And in fact, Borden stood to speak in Parliament. He said, I don't care how viable it is, no project of Sir William Mulock will proceed under my leadership.
As for the engineer, he got a small apology from one of the politicians who had wrongly attacked his engineering skills, but that was it. There would never be an inquiry into what had happened at the Newmarket Canal.
5 years ago, I was contacted by the University of Toronto, and they said that they had a group of 15 graduate students that wanted to examine whether this project was doable. The report indicated that not only was it feasible, but it probably was much preferable to the Trent Canal, that it was a no-brainer.
What can we learn from this story? Politics getting in the way of projects is definitely something that we still see today. In fact, even popular projects can fail if they get seen as politically motivated. As I walk along these concrete walls, I think about pride. Supporters pushed hard for this project despite the fact that canals had already become obsolete, and the Borden government scrapped a nearly finished transportation system, at least partly because it didn't like the person who started it. Aylesworth said that these structures would last a long time, standing as perpetual monuments to government folly. Well, Aylesworth was right. They stand today as part of Canada's living history.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.